Jim, it's terrific to have you here today. Very much looking forward to catching up with you. Let's start off with the role the Crossroads played in your development.
Yeah, so it's interesting. I hadn't given this like a lot of focus thought till you got back in touch with us all a couple weeks back. And as I mentioned to you before, I was delighted to receive that correspondence, and it's really fantastic to be in conversation now. I would say that Crossroads happened at a sort of pivotal moment in my life, right? Formative. And the experimental nature of it is still very much how I go about things today. I'm I do a lot of things like uh start new initiatives with people in terms of interdisciplinary research collaborations. I helped start a book series with University of Arizona Press. All those things are interesting. They come with some risk, but the payoff can be fantastic if you're able to bring together a group of people who are into the openness and sense of the direction they would like the collaboration to go into. So like being in an environment where people were doing that, even though I didn't really understand that when I was 13, 14 years old, it was very liberating. I think also the experiential kinds of learning that you guys did, um, the uh, the trips we went on, you probably remember we went to DC for the bicentennial. Um,
Correct.
and we stayed over there. I still like we stayed over there at 22nd and P Northwest.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, the hostel there, the youth
Yeah,
hostel.
and like whenever I'm in DC, I drive by there just to look at it again. And the filling station that was across the street from there is still there, you know. And so that was, those kinds of things. Going there on Amtrak, and sort of reaffirming the enjoyment and feel of passenger rail at a time when everyone else was going the other way, and so forth was also, delightful. I think the encouragement to try and do things in different ways, but I think most of all the possibility of interacting with lots of different people my age who were from different parts of the city and different from me, right? There was a lot of diversity at that school and all kinds of diversity, like there was, there was diversity in terms of balancing Black and white students at a time when that city was, and it still is, of course, intensely segregated. Um, there were, kids from suburbs, kids from the city. I think there were kids who came from fairly traditional families and kids who came from, families who were probably more, probably more like hippies, and I think possibilities and different ways of thinking, and being able to like talk and argue about that stuff, and being encouraged to do so, and also being encouraged to combine play and work, giant, you know.
Jim, I'd really like to put something in here on that note
Sure.
because you used the term experiential education, and I'm not sure that term even existed
I
in
don't think so. Yeah.
1974. But we were doing it, and I think the reason we were doing it, and this gets to kind of combining work and play,
Uh,
is that all of us had previously been camp counselors.
hmm.
And so it was really essential. If you're going to survive through the day, you've got to make it fun, but you
Mhm.
also want it to be productive. And I think we just took another step, taking a lot of camping experiences and bringing that into a school.
Uh,
Exactly.
is
One other thing, you talked about Amtrak.
Mhm.
And do you recall? I think this was that trip.
Hmm.
It was shortly after 3 Mile Island meltdown,
Right.
and the train went right by 3 Mile Island about a
Mhm.
month later. And that really, put everyone in a loop. It was, you know, something that we didn't expect to go by it. And then, oh my God, it's 3 Mile Island. And that's something, the nation still hasn't recovered from. Right.
Yes, I recall. Uh, so yeah, even so there's my career in anthropology involves a lot of that. Um, I I have spent a lot of time in all kinds of places in the world. I spent a lot of time in the lower Ninth Ward of New Orleans after
Mm.
Katrina. I spent a lot of time on reservations in the American West, especially the Pine Ridge Reservation of the Oglala Lakota Sioux and the Ute Mountain Reservation in the southwest corner of Colorado. And of course, my research in Tanzania and lots of other kinds of experiences. I'll tell you another example, like growing up after I moved from St. Louis to Detroit. Um, the Reagan administration had this thing called the Youth Corps, which is where they put kids to work, like cleaning up alleys and so forth, right? Painting
Mhm.
fire hydrants, which, was one of the few opportunities I had after high school. And they had combined the workforces of kids from the city and kids from the suburbs. And in Detroit, even more so than St. Louis in a lot of ways, especially at that time. Almost all the kids from the city were black, and almost all the kids from the suburbs were white. And they were always like at lunchtime, they were eating at different picnic tables and stuff. And it really, like, I was like, wow, that's odd, it wasn't what I was used to at all. And I went over and started hanging out with the city kids. And first they were like, what'd you come over here for? You know, and I started talking and we had all kinds of things in common and started joking around. Again, that was stuff that I started getting used to doing at Crossroads outside, before and after school and stuff like that. Sort of like questioning one another's experiences and like teasing one another, but also drawing out, ideas and stories and funny connections that I think became the basis of, relationships that wouldn't have otherwise happened.
I think you're right.
Yeah.
In some ways, as I said, we were making it up as we were going along, but we had some pretty good sense and overview. And I think that the way you describe the experiences are precisely how we would have wanted them to be. And it's so good to know that it has been a very positive experience for you. Jim, can you tell us a little bit about your family? Um, I think your wife is from Tanzania. Is that correct?
My wife Gladness comes from Tanzania. As you said, I met her when we I was doing my dissertation research on conflicts between parks and Maasai communities in Tanzania. And as a sidebar, the May issue of Atlantic has a big story on the Serengeti National Park and the current struggles of Maasai for continued existence, basically in those spaces, which is directly related to my work. Uh, the so Gladness and I, we hit it off because we shared a lot. We were intellectually curious people, and we had problems with authority and orthodoxy, organized religion, and stuff like that. She had a
Kudos to you.
yeah, her son Eric was 5 at the time, and so they were a package deal, and he grew up in a lot of different school systems in Tanzania, in the United States, and then went on to study film production and cinema studies. First, he went to Hampshire College, which is a Crossroads-esque kind of place.
Hmm.
Um, and uh, and as I told you, I think before we were talking, he went to a school in Denver called PS1, which was an experimental school started by people who got their BAs from Hampshire and then went back to Denver and wanted to start a school for kids, um, who were felt oppressed by like the normative structures of the school system and its disciplinary and disciplinary systems and standardized tests and tracking and all.
Charlottesville, Virginia.
Right. Yeah. You know, I teach at the University of Virginia. I'm in the Department of Anthropology at the University of Virginia, and I'm a chair of that department. This is my last year as chair. I'll tell you, you know, as far Charlottesville is also an interesting place. And it's also it's like a deeply problematic place in a lot of ways because of the histories and ongoing realities of racism here. Because, you know, the Unite the Right rally happened here
Right.
2017. We were living here at the time. Gladness and I were
We
down.
have another Crossroads alum who, as a journalist, was covering that. She was there that day.
Yeah, we were too, you know. And
Ah, okay.
yeah, and it was intense to be after all that stuff happened. A lot of people were sort of trying to congregate in places. So I was in an Irish pub downtown when Trump made that find people on both sides speech.
Right. Hmm.
And I've never seen such a like public outpouring of grief and anger happening in a space like that in the United States. I'm sure it's happened, but I was never present at it. Um, and so that kind of sets the stage. Like that kind of that stuff like that doesn't happen all the time, but it's indicative of a long history of that sort of thing around here. For that, you know.
So let me ask you this, because we are getting a little short on time.
Yeah, yeah.
And this was something I've wondered about, and that is using the skills, the perspectives you have as an anthropologist.
Mhm.
If you were invited into the White House to give suggestions as to how to look at global issues, what might you say?
You know, that question pulled me up because I hate to say my answer is I might decline the invitation. Um,
A
because
great one.
and
Yeah,
it goes back to what I was saying before about like this, you know, stuff that's been happening in terms of the, you know, dysfunction of our government. That became super evident in 2016, right? And
right.
hasn't
Mhm.
really has continued to be like visibly and visibly concerning on a daily basis, right?
Correct. I agree.
Because of course the things I would say would be, you know, stuff like we really need to rethink whether capitalism's working for us. We
Mhm.
need to think about you know, how we're going to get off fossil fuels, how we can become a less consumer-oriented society, how we can have a more equitable system of opportunities in our country, et cetera, right? Interestingly, another watershed I see in 1979 was like Carter's crisis of confidence speech,
Right. The
which
malaise.
which you guys actually made us watch and write about and stuff, which was part of the reason I remember it, right?
Ah, okay.
But you know, Carter was on, I mean, Carter did have a kind of like he was a bit of a Debbie Downer, right? But
Good way to
he
put it. More realistic.
yeah, influenced other people. But your question leads to this, right? Because that's
Mhm.
the intention of it. Um,
Right.
is like teaching's a good way for sure,
Sure.
and insisting on teaching in certain ways and creating the space to teach in those ways, which takes you back to your questions about Crossroads at the beginning of
Mhm.
this. I think seeking opportunities for collaboration with like-minded people trying to achieve things that you consider worthwhile, which is another thing that I think I started to realize at Crossroads and carried forward. Um, and building meaningful relationships that are enduring, and sticking with relationships that matter, are all things that I neglected to do for a big chunk of my life that I'm starting to realize the value of now. And I regard you getting back in touch with me and us having our conversation as, you know, indicative of that realization.